"Sir, would you like a flower?" said the beggar girl to the sad millionaire at the cemetery, not knowing that this gesture would change his life. The luxurious office on the 30th floor of St. Luke's Hospital perfectly reflected Dr. Richard Mitchell's personality. The grey walls, decorated with diplomas and international certifications, created an atmosphere as cold as the renowned plastic surgeon's gaze. At 45, he had achieved everything he had ever dreamed of: recognition, fortune, and a waiting list of patients willing to pay small fortunes for his exceptional skills. That Monday morning, while reviewing some medical records at his Italian glass desk, his secretary Sarah hurriedly entered his office, interrupting his concentration. "Dr. Mitchell, excuse the intrusion, but there's a different situation in the reception area," she said hesitantly. "Sarah, you know I don't see anyone without an appointment," he replied, without taking his eyes off the documents. "I know, doctor, but it's a child. She's been here for hours, refuses to leave, and says she needs to speak with you urgently." Richard sighed, irritated by the interruption. "Since when did we become a pediatric emergency room? Call security." "Doctor, please," Sarah insisted. "There's something different about her. She doesn't look well. She's very thin and—" "Fine," he cut her off. "Send her in. 5 minutes, no more than that." Seconds later, a frail girl of approximately 10 years old entered the office. Her dark hair was tied in a messy ponytail, and her clothes, although clean, were visibly worn. Her large brown eyes, however, shone with a determination that immediately caught the doctor's attention. "What's your name?" he asked, maintaining his professional demeanor. "Mary Claire," she answered, nervously fidgeting with the hem of her t-shirt. "You need to help me, doctor. My little brother Johnny, he's very sick." Richard adjusted himself in his chair, preparing to give the response he always gave in these cases. "Look, Mary Claire, I'm a plastic surgeon. I don't treat pediatric cases. You need to look for—" "But you're the best doctor here," she interrupted, taking a step forward. "Everyone talks about you, and Johnny, he needs the best. We've tried everything, doctor. My mum works day and night, but the money barely covers food." The doctor observed the girl more carefully. There was something in her voice, a mixture of desperation and hope, that, for some inexplicable reason, bothered him. It wasn't the first time someone had begged for his help, but there was something different here. "What's wrong with your brother?" he asked, surprising even himself with the question. Mary Claire approached the desk, her eyes filling with tears. "It's a rare disease, doctor. The clinic doctors said he needs special treatment, but it's very expensive. We live in a shack in Hope Village, and my mom—" "Hope Village?" interrupted Richard, remembering the poorest region of the city. "How did you get here?" "I walked," she answered simply. "Left home early. I needed to find you." Richard felt something strange in his chest, a sensation he hadn't experienced in a long time. This child's determination, who had walked across the city on foot to ask for his help, stirred something inside him that he thought was buried. "And why do you think I would help?" he asked, trying to maintain his professional composure. "Mary." Claire looked directly into his eyes, and for the first time in years, Richard felt truly exposed. "Because you can," she replied with a disconcerting simplicity. "And because everyone deserves a chance, don't they?" The silence that followed was interrupted by Sarah, who entered the office again. "Doctor, your next patient is already waiting." Richard made a gesture with his hand, dismissing the secretary, without taking his eyes off Mary Claire. Something about this girl intrigued him, as if she could see through the mask of coldness he had built over the years. The luxurious office seemed even more imposing when seen through Mary Claire's eyes. The girl remained standing, her hands nervously gripping the hem of her t-shirt while waiting for the doctor's response. Dr. Mitchell, in turn, felt inexplicably disturbed by this child's presence. "Where's your brother now?" he asked, breaking the silence. "At home with my mom," replied Mary Claire. "She doesn't know I came. I left after she went to work." Richard rose from his chair and walked to the window. From the 30th floor, he had a privileged view of the city. In the distance, he could see the Hope Village region, a cluster of simple houses that contrasted drastically with the downtown skyscrapers. "You shouldn't be alone on the streets," he said, still looking out the window. It's dangerous." "What's more dangerous is doing nothing," she answered with wisdom that seemed beyond her years. "Johnny is getting worse every day. Mom cries in secret, but I hear her." Richard turned to face her. In his years of practice, he had built a reputation based on technical excellence and emotional detachment. His patients sought him out for his competence, not his compassion. That's how things worked in his world. "What's your brother's exact diagnosis?" he asked, picking up a pen and a notepad. Mary Claire rummaged through her worn backpack and pulled out some folded papers. "Here, doctor, these are the tests they did at the clinic. I don't really understand what's written, but I kept everything." Richard took the papers and began analyzing them. His eyes quickly scanned the results and his expression subtly changed. The boy's condition was indeed serious, requiring complex and expensive treatment. "How old is your brother?" he asked, still studying the documents. "6, she answered. "But he looks smaller because he can't play like other children. He gets tired very quickly." The doctor continued analyzing the tests, his mind working rapidly. The necessary treatment was far beyond this family's financial possibilities. Moreover, it wasn't his specialty. He was a plastic surgeon, not a pediatrician. "Mary Claire," he began, carefully choosing his words, "I understand your concern, but I'm not the most suitable doctor for your brother's case. There are specialists—" "Please," she interrupted, her voice breaking. "I know you can help. Everyone says you're the most important doctor here. If you want to, you can do something. I can work to pay. I can clean your office, do anything." The girl's innocent proposal hit Richard like a punch to the stomach. The image of this child offering to work in exchange for her brother's treatment made him feel something he hadn't experienced in a long time: shame. Sarah entered the office again. "Dr. Mitchell, your schedule is running behind and cancel my next appointments," he ordered, surprising both the secretary and himself. "And call Dr. Williams from Pediatrics. Tell him I need to speak with him urgently." Mary Claire looked at him with a mixture of surprise and hope. "Are you going to help?" Richard adjusted his tie, an automatic gesture he made when about to make an important decision. "Let's see what we can do," he replied, trying to maintain a professional tone. "But first, let's call your mother. She must be worried." The call. To Mrs. Susan Adams, Mary Claire's mother was tense. The woman, in tears upon discovering where her daughter was, had to leave work in a hurry. Richard offered his private driver to pick her up, a gesture that surprised even Sarah, his longtime secretary. While they waited, Mary Claire sat quietly in one of the office armchairs, her feet swinging without reaching the floor. Richard observed her discreetly, intrigued by the maturity of this child, who had crossed the city alone out of love for her brother. "You must be hungry," he said, breaking the silence. "Sarah, can you get something for her to eat?" The girl's eyes widened when the secretary returned with a complete meal: sandwich, juice, and even a chocolate bar. "Thank you," she murmured, holding the sandwich as if it were a treasure. "Eat slowly," Richard advised, noticing the voracity with which she attacked the food. Something inside him twisted at the sight. When Mrs. Adams arrived, the office witnessed an emotion-laden meeting. The woman, still dressed in her cleaning assistant uniform, hugged her daughter tightly, alternating between scolding her for the worry caused and thanking God she was safe. "I'm sorry, doctor," she said, embarrassed, trying to fix her disheveled hair. "Mary Claire can be very stubborn sometimes. She shouldn't have bothered you." Richard observed the woman before him. The tired eyes, the calloused hands, the resigned posture of someone who carries the world on her shoulders. "That wasn't a bother," he replied, surprising himself with the sincerity in his voice. "Actually, I'd like to talk about Johnny." Mrs. Adams's face paled. "Doctor, I can't afford a private consultation. We've tried all the resources through public health care, but the waiting list—" "Please sit down," he interrupted, indicating the chair. "I've already read the tests that Mary Claire brought. Johnny's condition is serious, but treatments are available." "I know," she replied, tears beginning to well up. "But they cost a fortune. Just the medicine he needs to take every month is more than I earn." Richard picked up his tablet and began making some notes. "Mrs. Adams, I'm not a specialist in your son's case, but I know who is. Dr. Williams, our head of pediatrics, is one of the leading authorities in treating this condition." Mary Claire, who had been observing everything in silence, approached her mother and held her hand. The gesture didn't go unnoticed by Richard, who felt something stir in his chest. "What do you think about scheduling an appointment with him today?" Richard proposed. "We can do a complete evaluation and discuss treatment possibilities." "But doctor, I already said I can't." "Don't worry about that now," he cut in, surprising himself with his own words. "Let's first understand exactly what Johnny needs, then we'll talk about the rest." Mrs. Adams covered her face with her hands, letting the tears flow freely. Mary Claire hugged her, and Richard realized that for the first time in a long time, he was truly involved with the fate of his patients. "Sarah," he called through the intercom, "contact Dr. Williams. Tell him it's a special case and that I need his schedule today." While waiting for a response, Richard began asking more questions about Johnny. Each answer revealed a reality he knew only through newspaper headlines: the daily struggle for survival, the impossible choices between buying food or medicine, the crushing weight of poverty on a family's shoulders. Dr. Williams arrived at the office in the late afternoon after rearranging his schedule to accommodate Richard's urgent request. He was a man in his 60s, with graying hair and a gentle smile that contrasted with Richard's seriousness. "So this is the special case?" he asked, observing Mary Claire and her mother with genuine interest. Richard presented the situation, handing over the tests the girl had brought. While the pediatrician analyzed the documents, a tense silence hung in the air. Mary Claire squeezed her mother's hand, her eyes fixed on the older doctor, as if trying to guess his thoughts. "We need to see Johnny as soon as possible," Dr. Williams declared after a few minutes. "His condition is serious, but we still have time to intervene if we act quickly." "Can you help my little brother?" asked Mary Claire, her voice small but full of hope. The pediatrician smiled at her. "I'll do my best, dear, but first I need to examine him personally. Mrs. Adams, can you bring him in tomorrow morning?" I need to talk to my boss," she replied hesitantly. "I already missed today and—" "Don't worry about that," interrupted Richard, his voice surprisingly gentle. "I can arrange a car to pick you up." Dr. Williams gave his colleague a curious look. He had known Richard for years and had never seen him show so much interest in a case outside his specialty. "Great," said the pediatrician, turning back to Mrs. Adams. "Tomorrow at 8 o'clock then. We'll do all the necessary tests and develop an appropriate treatment plan." When mother and daughter left the office, accompanied by Sarah to the car that would take them home, the two doctors remained silent for a few moments. "What's gotten into you, Richard?" Dr. Williams finally asked. "I've never seen you so involved." Richard adjusted his tie, a gesture he always made when feeling uncomfortable. "There's something different about this girl," he replied, looking out the window. "The way she crossed the city alone, how she offered to work to pay for her brother's treatment." "You know the treatment will be expensive," observed Dr. Williams, "and long. Even with all the hospital's resources, it will be a challenge." "I know," replied Richard, turning to face his colleague, "but I also know we have the means to help." "The hospital has a special fund for special cases, doesn't it?" "It does, but you've never been interested in that before. You always said medicine isn't charity." Richard sat in his chair, running his hand through his impeccably combed hair. "Maybe I was wrong," he murmured, more to himself than to his colleague. Dr. Williams smiled, a smile that mixed surprise and satisfaction. "You know, Richard, in all these years of medicine, I've learned that sometimes we need a little angel to show us the way back to our humanity." His colleague's words echoed in Richard's mind long after he left the office. Sitting alone, looking at the city that was lighting up with the falling night, he found himself thinking about Mary Claire and how a 10-year-old child had managed to break through the barrier of indifference he had spent years building. He picked up his cell phone and made a call. "Sarah, please prepare all the necessary documentation to access the hospital's special fund and schedule a meeting with the administrative board for tomorrow afternoon. Yes, it's urgent." The next morning, St. Luke's Hospital witnessed an unusual scene. Dr. Richard Mitchell, known for his chronometric punctuality, arrived an hour earlier than usual. His impeccable suit and his proud posture contrasted with the restlessness in his gaze as he waited in the pediatric ward reception. At 7:45, Mrs. Adams arrived with her 2 children. Johnny, a tiny 6-year-old boy, was in his mother's arms, his breathing visibly labored from the effort of the journey. Mary Claire walked alongside them, carrying a small backpack with her brother's belongings. "Good morning," greeted Richard, approaching. His tone of voice, normally cold and professional, sounded strangely gentle. Johnny looked at him with large, curious eyes, very similar to his sister's. "Are you the doctor Mary Claire talked about?" he asked, his voice low and interrupted by difficult breathing. "Yes, I am," replied Richard, feeling a lump in his throat as he observed the boy's effort to speak. "And today you're going to meet another very special doctor, Dr. Williams." "Mary." Claire held her brother's hand as he was placed in a wheelchair. "Dr. Mitchell is nice, Johnny. He's going to help you, you'll see." The confidence in the girl's voice hit Richard in a way he hadn't expected. How could this child place so much faith in him, a man who until 2 days ago was known for his coldness and detachment? Dr. Williams received them in his office, decorated with colorful drawings and toys, a welcoming environment that soon put Johnny at ease. The examination was thorough, and Richard remained present the entire time, observing every detail with an attention that surprised even his pediatrician colleague. "Mrs. Adams," called Dr. Williams after finishing the exams, "I need to talk to you about the treatment. Mary Claire, can you take your brother to play a little bit in that corner? Nurse Rose will stay with you." As the children moved away, the doctors explained to the mother the complexity of the situation. The treatment would be long and would require expensive medications, physical therapy sessions, and possible hospitalizations. "But don't worry about the costs now," Richard intervened before Mrs. Adams could express her despair. "We're activating the hospital's special fund, and I will personally monitor the entire process." "Dr. Mitchell," she murmured, tears silently streaming down, "why are you doing all this for us?" The question caught Richard by surprise. Why was he doing this? He who always kept a safe distance from his patients, who turned medicine into a lucrative business, was now completely involved with this family's fate. "Because your daughter taught me something important," he replied after a moment of reflection. "Sometimes we need someone to remind us of the true meaning of being a doctor." On the other side of the room, Mary Claire played with her brother, inventing stories to distract him. Her smile, her dedication, and her unconditional love were like a mirror reflecting everything Richard had forgotten over the years: the purity of feelings, the strength of hope, and the transformative power of compassion. The meeting with the hospital's administrative board was scheduled for 2 o'clock. Richard adjusted his tie for the 3rd time while waiting in the meeting room. In his hands, a folder contained all of Johnny's case documents, including a detailed report he had prepared during the night. "Dr. Mitchell," called Dr. Williams, entering the room, "I brought this morning's test results. They confirm our initial suspicion. The situation is serious, but we still have a good chance if we start treatment immediately." The board members arrived one by one. There were 15 people in total, all wearing expensive suits and carrying state-of-the-art tablets. Richard knew each of them, had participated in countless similar meetings, but had never felt so nervous. "Well, Dr. Mitchell," began the board president, Dr. Thompson, "I must confess I was surprised by your urgent request. You've never shown interest in special fund cases before." Richard stood up, distributing copies of the report he had prepared. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your presence. The case I bring today is special and requires our immediate attention." For the next hour, Richard presented Johnny's situation with an eloquence that surprised even Dr. Williams. He spoke about the severity of the disease, about the necessary treatment, and most importantly, about the impact this family had had on him. "Dr. Mitchell," interrupted one of the board members, "I understand your concern, but the special fund has limited resources. We're already handling several cases. "I know that," replied Richard, his voice firm, "and that's why I'm proposing something different. I want to donate part of my fees to the special fund, specifically for cases like Johnny's." A murmur ran through the room. Richard Mitchell, known for being one of the highest-paid surgeons in the country, offering to donate money. "Additionally," he continued, "I've spoken with some colleagues in plastic surgery. We're willing to perform free procedures to increase the fund's resources." Dr. Thompson leaned forward, visibly intrigued. "What prompted this change, Dr. Mitchell? As far as I know, you've always maintained that a hospital is not a charity institution." Richard paused for a moment, thinking about Mary Claire and her determination to save her brother. "Sometimes," he replied, "we need a reality check to remind us of what's truly important." The discussion extended for another hour. Numbers were analyzed, proposals were debated, and in the end, the board reached a decision. Johnny's case would be accepted into the special fund program, with Richard as the doctor responsible for monitoring the case. As he left the meeting, Dr. Williams put his hand on his colleague's shoulder. "You know, Richard, in all these years of practice, I've never seen you fight so hard for something." "I barely recognize myself," admitted Richard, a small smile appearing on his lips. "But when I saw that girl cross the city alone out of love for her brother, I realized I had forgotten something fundamental. Medicine isn't just about curing diseases, it's about caring for people." At that moment, his cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Sarah. "Dr. Mitchell, Mrs. Adams is here with the children for the first tests. Mary Claire asked about you. The following weeks brought a remarkable transformation, not only in Johnny's life, but also in the routine of St. Luke's Hospital. Mary Claire's frequent presence in the hospital corridors began to affect everyone around her. Nurses, doctors, and even other patients were captivated by her sincere smile and dedication to her brother. Richard, in particular, saw his life changing in ways he had never thought possible. His mornings, previously filled exclusively with plastic surgery consultations, now began with a visit to the pediatric ward. He made a point of personally monitoring Johnny's progress, even if it meant reorganizing his packed schedule. "Do you have siblings too, Dr. Mitchell?" asked Mary Claire one of those mornings as they watched Johnny in his physical therapy session. The question caught Richard by surprise. "I had," he answered, his voice softening. "A younger sister. But she's no longer with us." "Mary," Claire looked at him with her large brown eyes. "I'm sorry," she said, with a maturity that didn't match her age. "Were you as close as Johnny and me?" Richard felt a lump in his throat. Memories long stored away began to emerge. Childhood games, shared laughter, promises of eternal protection. "We were," he replied after a pause, "but I was very young when she passed away. After that, I think I built a wall around myself." "Like the ones in your office?" she asked innocently. "All grey and colourless?" The girl's observation made him laugh, a sound that surprised even the passing nurses. Dr. Richard Mitchell, known for his unwavering seriousness, was genuinely laughing. "Exactly like those," he agreed. "But you know what? I think it's time to add some colour to them." Johnny's treatment was progressing slowly but with promising results. The new medications were taking effect, and the physical therapy sessions were helping to strengthen his weakened body. Mrs. Adams, thanks to a special arrangement made by Richard with her employer, was able to accompany her son without jeopardizing her job. However, not everything was rosy. The cost of the treatment, even with the support of the special fund, was proving greater than anticipated. Richard began to notice concerned looks in board meetings and whispers in the corridors about Dr. Mitchell's special case. One afternoon, while reviewing the hospital's accounts in his office, Richard received an unexpected visit from Dr. Thompson. "Richard," he began, his tone grave, "we need to talk about the boy Johnny's case. The costs are exceeding our initial predictions." Richard felt his body stiffen. "The results are positive, Albert. The boy is responding well to the treatment." "I'm not questioning the effectiveness," replied Thompson. "But as board president, I need to think about the hospital's sustainability. We can't commit our resources to a single case." The silence that followed Thompson's words weighed like lead in the office. Richard slowly rose from his chair, walked to the window, and observed the city below. Somewhere in Hope Village, a family was placing all their hopes in him. "What do you suggest, Albert?" he asked, his voice controlled. "We need to establish a limit," replied Thompson. "Perhaps transfer the case to a public hospital where—" "No," interrupted Richard, turning abruptly. "That's not an option." "Richard, I know you've become personally involved with this case, but—" "Personal involvement," repeated Richard, a bitter smile on his lips. "Do you know what my first case as a resident was, Albert? A 7-year-old girl. She came to the emergency room with a condition similar to Johnny's. I was young, idealistic, wanted to save the world, but the hospital where I worked didn't have resources, and she was transferred elsewhere. I never knew what happened to her." Thompson observed, his colleague with interest. In all the years he had known Richard, he had never heard him speak of his past. "That story transformed me," continued Richard. "I decided I would never feel powerless again. I studied, specialized, built a solid career, but in the process, I forgot why I had chosen to become a doctor in the first place." Walking to his desk, Richard opened a drawer and removed an envelope. "Here's my proposal," he said, handing the document to Thompson. "I'm willing to give up 40% of my fees for the next 2 years. All of that amount will be directed to the special fund." Thompson's eyes widened as he read the document. "This is substantial." "I've also spoken with some colleagues," continued Richard. "Several of them have committed to performing pro bono procedures to increase the fund's resources. Dr. Williams has already agreed to dedicate 2 afternoons a week exclusively to special cases." "And your own career? Your plans?" Richard thought of Mary Claire, of her courage in crossing the city alone out of love for her brother. He thought of Johnny, bravely fighting against a disease that was trying to steal his childhood. He thought of his own sister and all the promises he couldn't keep. "My plans have changed," he replied simply. "That girl has taught me more about medicine in the last few weeks than I learned in years of career. She reminded me that sometimes we need to cross the entire city, face our fears and prejudices to find what really matters." Thompson observed his colleague for a long moment. "You know," he finally said, "when you brought this case to the board, many thought it was just a passing whim. The great Dr. Mitchell having his moment of charity. And now?" "Now," smiled Thompson, "I think we're witnessing something much deeper, a transformation that goes beyond a single case." 3 months had passed since Mary Claire crossed the city in search of help for her brother. Autumn was already beginning to paint the hospital trees with golden tones, and a gentle breeze entered through the window of the room where Johnny was doing his physical therapy. "Look, Dr. Mitchell," exclaimed the boy, taking a few steps without help. "I'm doing it." Richard observed the scene with a discreet smile on his lips. Johnny's progress was visible. His cheeks were rosier, his breathing more controlled, and his eyes sparkled with an energy that didn't exist before. Mary Claire, sitting in a corner of the room, was drawing in a notebook she had received from Sarah. The secretary, touched by the girl's story, had developed a special affection for her, always keeping small surprises in her drawer. "What are you drawing?" asked Richard, approaching. "Our family," she replied, showing the drawing. On the paper, there was a colorful house with several people, Mrs. Adams, Johnny herself, and, to Richard's surprise, a tall figure in a white coat. "And who's this?" he asked, pointing to the figure. "It's you, silly," she replied naturally. "You're part of our family now, aren't you?" Richard felt something warm spread in his chest. In all his years of practice, he had never been included in a family drawing. His carefully constructed walls were beginning to show ever larger cracks. His office had also changed. The grey walls now displayed colorful drawings made by Johnny and Mary Claire. On his desk, next to the international diplomas, there was a photo of the siblings smiling during a physical therapy session. But not everything was smiles. Johnny's treatment, although progressing well, still faced challenges. The costs remained high, and even with Richard's donation and the support of other doctors, the hospital's special fund was under pressure. One afternoon, while reviewing some medical records in his office, Richard received an unexpected call. It was an important European medical research institute offering a prominent position with a salary 3 times higher than his current one. "It's a unique opportunity, Dr. Mitchell," said the Institute's director. "Your reputation as a surgeon is impeccable, and we need someone with your experience to lead our research team." Richard looked at Mary Claire's drawing on his desk. The figure in the white coat smiled next to the family, as if it had always belonged there. "Can I think about the proposal for a bit?" he asked. "Of course, but don't take too long. We have other interested candidates." After hanging up the phone, Richard remained silent, observing the city through the window. Hope Village, which before was just a distant cluster of houses, now had a special meaning for him. It was the place where a little warrior lived, a girl who had taught him more about courage and love than all his years of study. The clock was almost striking midnight when Richard finally left the hospital that night. The European Institute's proposal still echoed in his mind, mixing with the memories of the past few months. Mary, Claire's smile, Johnny's progress, the changes in his own life. Upon arriving at his luxurious apartment, Richard realized how cold and impersonal the space seemed. The white walls, the expensive furniture, everything reflected the man he used to be. But now something had changed. The next morning, during the regular meeting with the medical team, Dr. Williams noticed that something was bothering his colleague. "Did something happen, Richard?" he asked when they were alone. "I received an offer," replied Richard, telling him about the European Institute. "It's the kind of opportunity I would have accepted without thinking twice a few months ago." "And now?" "Now? I don't know. It's like I'm seeing the world through different eyes. That girl, Paul, she changed something in me." Dr. Williams smiled. "You know, Richard, throughout my career I've learned that medicine isn't just about curing diseases. It's about human connections, about making a difference in people's lives." Before Richard could respond, Sarah hurriedly entered the room. "Dr. Mitchell, sorry to interrupt, but Mary Claire is here. She seems very agitated." Richard stood up immediately. In the reception area, he found Mary Claire with tears in her eyes. "What happened?" he asked, kneeling to be at her height. "Johnny," she began, trying to control her crying. "He was doing so well, but this morning he couldn't get out of bed. He's very tired, doctor. Mum couldn't miss work today, so I came alone." Richard exchanged a quick look with Dr. Williams, who was already picking up the phone to activate the emergency team. "We'll go get your brother right now," said Richard, holding the girl's hand. "Don't worry, we'll take care of him." On the way to Hope Village, in the hospital's chauffeur-driven car, Mary Claire held Richard's hand tightly. "You won't let anything happen to him, will you?" The question hit Richard like a punch to the stomach. The absolute trust in the girl's eyes weighed more than any responsibility he had ever carried in his career. "No, Mary Claire," he replied, gently squeezing her hand. "I promise I'll do everything in my power to help your brother." At that moment, the European Institute's proposal seemed even more distant. How could he leave this family now? How could he abandon this girl who had taught him the true meaning of being a doctor? The hospital went on high alert when Richard arrived with Johnny in his arms. The boy was pale and his breathing was more irregular than normal. Mary Claire ran alongside the stretcher, refusing to let go of her brother's hand as the medical team led him to the emergency room. "I need you to wait out here with Sarah," Richard said gently to the girl. "I promise I'll take good care of Johnny." Mary Claire reluctantly released her brother's hand, but before Richard entered the emergency room, she called out to him, "Dr. Mitchell, do you remember the promise?" He paused for a moment, looking into those eyes full of trust. "I remember, Mary Claire. I won't give up on your brother." The next few hours were intense. Dr. Williams coordinated the medical team while Richard didn't leave Johnny's side. The tests revealed that the boy's body was reacting unexpectedly to the treatment, requiring urgent adjustments. "We need a specific medication," explained Dr. Williams, showing the results to Richard. "It's a new protocol that was recently approved. But, we don't have this medication in the United States yet. It's only available in some research centers in Europe." Richard felt his heart race. The European Institute's proposal flashed back into his mind like lightning. He knew people there, had contacts, could... "How much time do we have?" he asked. "The situation is delicate," replied Dr. Williams. "We need to act within the next 48 hours." Richard left the emergency room and found Mary Claire sleeping on Sarah's lap. Mrs. Adams had arrived from work and was sitting next to them, her hands joined in a silent prayer. "Dr. Mitchell," called Mrs. Adams, standing up. "How is my son?" He explained the situation as clearly as possible, trying to balance truth with hope. When he finished, Mrs. Adams covered her face with her hands, her silent tears expressing all her despair. "Mrs. Adams," said Richard, his voice firm, "I promised Mary Claire I wouldn't give up on Johnny, and I'm going to keep that promise." Returning to his office, Richard made a call that would change the course of everything. "Dr. Mueller, this is Richard Mitchell. About that institute proposal, I need an urgent favor." The next few hours were a race against time. Richard activated all his contacts, used all his influence, and most importantly, put his own reputation on the line. The negotiation with the European Institute took a completely different direction from what was expected. 6 months had passed since that tense night at the hospital. Autumn had given way to winter, and now spring was beginning to color the gardens of St. Luke's Hospital. In Richard's former office, the grey walls had been completely repainted with vibrant colors, personally chosen by Mary Claire and Johnny. The agreement Richard made with the European Institute surprised everyone. Instead of accepting the offered position, he negotiated an international partnership. St. Luke's Hospital would become an associated research center with access to experimental medications and treatments. In exchange, Richard would coordinate research remotely and make periodic visits to the Institute. "It was the best decision I've ever made," he explained to Dr. Williams as they watched Johnny playing in the hospital garden. The boy, now with much more energy, was chasing his sister among the newly planted flowers. The hospital's special fund had also been transformed. Richard's initiative inspired other doctors, and soon a broader care program was created. The walls, separating the different realities of the city, were, little by little, beginning to dissolve. "Dr. Mitchell," called Mary Claire, running toward him with a drawing in her hands. "Look what I made at school." The drawing showed the hospital, but not as it was before. The walls were colorful, there were flowers everywhere, and people of different sizes and colors smiled together. In the center, the figure of the doctor in the white coat was holding hands with 2 children. "This is how I see the hospital now," she explained proudly. "A place where everyone can receive help, no matter where they come from." Richard hung the drawing in a special place in his new office, next to the photo he cherished most. Himself, Mary Claire, and Johnny on the day the boy was discharged after the crisis. The image perfectly captured the moment when he understood that his true wealth wasn't in the international diplomas or high fees, but in the ability to make a difference in people's lives. "You know, Mary Claire," he said, adjusting the drawing on the wall, "you taught me something very important." "Me?" she asked, surprised. "But you're the doctor." Richard smiled, remembering the determined girl who had entered his office months ago. "Sometimes we need someone special to show us the way back to our heart. You taught me that medicine isn't about grey walls and diplomas on the wall. It's about courage, love, and most importantly, about never giving up on those we need to protect." Johnny approached them, his steps now firm and sure. "Dr. Mitchell, tell that story again about how Mary Claire crossed the whole city alone to help me." "That's a story I'll never tire of telling," replied Richard, sitting with the children on his office sofa. "It's the story of how a little warrior taught me the true meaning of being a doctor." End of story.